My name's Miranda, and this is my story. My parents, Jack and Linda Thompson, had it all: successful careers, a beautiful house in the suburbs, and a plan. A plan that involved having a son, their precious heir. Instead, they got me. I remember the day I realized I wasn't the child they'd hoped for. I was 5, playing with my dolls in the living room when I overheard my mom on the phone. "Yes, it's true. We're having a boy." Her voice was filled with an excitement I'd never heard before. "Oh, you have no idea how long we've waited for this. Finally, a son." Those words cut deep. I didn't fully understand then, but I felt it, the sting of being second best, unwanted. Things changed quickly after that. Mom's belly grew bigger, and so did the distance between us. Dad was always working, and when he was home, all the talk was about the baby boy on the way. One day, Mom called me into the kitchen. "Miranda, sweetie, we need to talk." I climbed onto a chair, my legs dangling. "What is it, Mommy?" She didn't look at me as she spoke. "You're going to stay with Grandma for a while. Isn't that exciting? Mommy and Daddy need to prepare for the baby. You'll have more fun with Grandma anyway." And just like that, I was packed off to Grandma's house. Grandma Rose was Dad's mom, a retired English literature professor. She lived in a cozy little house filled with books and the smell of freshly baked cookies. Living with Grandma was different. She actually paid attention to me, listened when I talked, and didn't seem bothered by my presence. We'd spend hours reading together, and she'd tell me stories about when she was a teacher. For the first time in my life, I felt loved, truly loved. 2 years flew by. I was 7 when Dad showed up at Grandma's doorstep. "It's time to come home, Miranda," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your brother needs you." Brother, the word felt foreign. As we drove home, Dad filled the silence with awkward small talk. "Your brother's name is Ethan, he's one now. You're a big sister now, Miranda. That's a big responsibility." I nodded, not really understanding what that meant. Little did I know, my childhood was about to end. We pulled into the driveway of our house. It looked the same, but it felt different. Mom was waiting at the door, a toddler on her hip. "Miranda, meet your brother, Ethan," she said, her voice oddly formal. I looked at the chubby-faced boy with curly blonde hair. He gurgled and reached out a pudgy hand towards me. "Hi, Ethan," I said softly. And just like that, at 7 years old, I became more than a sister. I became a caretaker, a responsibility, a built-in babysitter. My childhood slipped away, replaced by dirty diapers, constant vigilance, and the weight of expectations I was too young to bear. While my classmates were playing with dolls and learning to ride bikes, I was changing diapers and warming bottles. "Miranda, can you watch Ethan while I make a call?" Mom would say, not really asking. I'd nod, already reaching for my little brother. It wasn't that I didn't love Ethan, I did, fiercely. His toothless grin and grabby little hands had won me over from day one. But the constant responsibility was overwhelming. Days blurred together in a haze of school, chores, and babysitting. I was exhausted, struggling to keep up with my homework while making sure Ethan was safe and happy. But no matter how hard I tried, it never seemed to be enough. One fateful day, I took Ethan to the park. He was 2 now, full of energy and curiosity. I turned my back for just a second to tie my shoelace, and in that moment, disaster struck. "Miwanda!" Ethan's cry pierced the air, followed by a thud. I whirled around to see him sprawled on the ground, his knee bleeding. Panic seized me as I scooped him up, trying to soothe his wails. When we got home, Mom exploded. "How could you be so careless?" she shouted, cradling Ethan. "You're supposed to watch him." "I'm sorry, I just..." "No excuses," Dad chimed in, his face red with anger. "Go to your room. We'll discuss your punishment later." I fled upstairs, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't fair. I was doing my best, but I was just a kid myself. The incidents piled up. Ethan burning his tongue on hot porridge because I didn't blow on it enough. A bump on his head from a fall I couldn't prevent. Each time, the punishments got harsher, the disappointment in my parents' eyes more evident. Through it all, Grandma Rose was my lifeline. She'd visit when she could, her presence a balm to my battered spirit. During one visit, I overheard her confronting my parents in the kitchen. "This is unacceptable," Grandma's usually gentle voice was sharp. "Miranda is a child, not a nanny. Your favoritism towards Ethan is hurting her." "Mother, please," Dad sighed. "These are our children. We know what's best for them." "Do you?" Grandma challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, you're neglecting one child in favor of the other." "That's enough," Mom cut in. "We appreciate your concern, but this is our family. We'll raise our children as we see fit." I threw myself into my studies. School became my sanctuary, a place where I could shine on my own merits. And shine I did, my grades a silent rebellion against the notion that I wasn't good enough. The years flew by, and before I knew it, I was standing at a crossroads. High school was behind me, and college loomed ahead. Despite the constant struggle at home, I'd managed to excel in my studies. It was my ticket out, my chance at freedom. When the acceptance letter arrived, I could hardly believe my eyes. Not only had I been accepted to study investment management, but I'd also received a full scholarship. My hands shook as I read the words over and over again. "Mom, Dad," I called out, racing down the stairs. "I got in. Full scholarship." "Oh, thank goodness," Mom sighed, relief evident in her voice. "That saves us a fortune. We need to start saving for Ethan's college fund." My heart sank. Of course. It wasn't about my achievement. It was about the money they wouldn't have to spend on me. The first few months were a whirlwind of classes, new friends, and the exhilarating taste of freedom. The money from my parents, combined with the small amounts Grandma Rose secretly sent, was just enough to scrape by. I was careful with every penny, knowing how precious this lifeline was. But 6 months into my college journey, everything changed again. My phone rang one evening as I was studying for a finance exam. "Miranda," Mom's voice came through, curt and businesslike. "We won't be sending you any more money. Ethan needs tutors if he's going to have any chance at college. We need to focus our resources on him now." I felt the familiar sting of rejection, of being cast aside. "But Mom, I can barely." "You're an adult now, Miranda," she cut me off. "You need to solve your own problems. We can't keep supporting you forever." The next few weeks were a blur of stress and sleepless nights. I scoured job boards, applied to every position I could find. Finally, I landed a part-time gig at a nearby cafe. The hours were long, the pay was meager, but it was something. Balancing work and studies was brutal. I'd rush from classes to shifts, then stay up late into the night studying. Dark circles became a permanent fixture under my eyes, and my grades started to slip. One particularly rough day, I called Grandma Rose, desperate for a friendly voice. "Miranda, sweetheart, you sound exhausted," she said, concern evident in her voice. The dam broke. Through tears, I told her everything, the cut-off allowance, the grueling work hours, the struggle to keep up with my studies. "Those absolute," Grandma cut herself off, taking a deep breath. "Listen to me, Miranda, you focus on your studies. I'm increasing your monthly allowance. And don't you dare argue with me about it." "But Grandma." "No buts," she said firmly. "You deserve this education, and you shouldn't have to kill yourself working to get it. Your parents, well, let's just say, I'll be having words with them." True to her word, Grandma's support allowed me to cut back my work hours. I could breathe again, focus on my classes. My grades improved, and for the first time in months, I felt hope. The years at college flew by in a blur of textbooks, exams, and late-night study sessions. Before I knew it, I was standing on the stage, diploma in hand, magna cum laude gleaming on the certificate. As I scanned the audience, I spotted Grandma Rose, beaming with pride. My parents and Ethan were noticeably absent. With my degree in hand, doors opened. I landed a job at Stonebridge Investments, a prestigious firm in the city. The salary was more money than I'd ever seen, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly independent. To save money, I moved in with Sarah, a coworker who became a fast friend. Our tiny apartment was a far cry from the dorms, but it was ours, and it felt like freedom. When my first paycheck arrived, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. I scoured every second-hand bookstore in the city until I found it, a rare first edition of Grandma's favorite author. The following weekend, I took a train to my hometown, gift in hand. Grandma's face lit up when she saw me at her door. "Miranda, what a wonderful surprise." I presented her with the wrapped book, watching as tears welled in her eyes when she opened it. "Oh, my dear girl," she whispered, hugging me tight. "You shouldn't have." "I wanted to," I said simply. "You've done so much for me, Grandma." As we chatted over tea, I mentioned visiting my parents. Grandma's face tightened slightly, but she nodded. "I'm sure they'd love to see you." But when I called, Mom's voice was distant. "Oh, this weekend? We're quite busy, Miranda. Perhaps another time." The rejection stung, but I pushed it aside. I spent the weekend with Grandma instead, relishing her warmth and genuine interest in my life. As I boarded the train back to the city on Sunday, I couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and relief. Time marched on. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye, and my career soared. My bosses praised my work ethic and insight, and the bonuses started rolling in. Soon, I was able to afford my own apartment, a small, sun-filled space that was all mine. One evening, as I was settling in for a quiet night, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. "Miranda," she said without preamble. "These teachers, they just don't understand Ethan. They're giving him such poor grades. He barely scraped into City College." I bit my lip, choosing my words carefully. "Mom, maybe college isn't the right path for everyone. There are great vocational courses Ethan could." "Don't be stupid," she snapped. "Your brother is brilliant. Much smarter than you, actually. He's just misunderstood. He'll show everyone, you'll see." As I hung up, I gazed around my apartment, the tangible proof of my success. Yet somehow, I still felt like that little girl, desperately seeking approval. Life has a funny way of appending expectations. While I was building my career, brick by careful brick, Ethan's college experience was crumbling around him. It was a crisp autumn day when Mom called again, her voice tight with frustration. "Ethan's been expelled," she said without preamble. "He's coming home." She launched into a tirade about unfair professors and a system designed to fail students like Ethan. I listened, biting my tongue against the urge to point out the thousands they'd spent on his education, the loans they'd taken out to rent him a luxury apartment, the generous allowance they'd provided. All things I'd never had. "We'll figure something out," Mom concluded. "Ethan just needs time to find his path." I thought about Ethan, now 21, returning to our childhood home, while I, at 27, was forging ahead in my career. The contrast was stark, but I pushed the thought aside. Comparison is the thief of joy, after all. Life, however, had other plans for me. It was at a company event that I met Jack, tall, kind-eyed, with a quick wit that made me laugh like I hadn't in years. Our whirlwind romance swept me off my feet, and before I knew it, we were standing in a small chapel, exchanging vows in front of a handful of loved ones. Grandma Rose was there, of course, beaming with pride. My parents attended too, though their smiles seemed a bit forced. Ethan didn't come, citing a vague prior commitment. Jack and I moved into his apartment, a cozy space that quickly became home. His parents, Tom and Ellen, welcomed me with open arms, their warmth a balm to my soul. A year into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. The joy that filled me was indescribable. When we announced it to our families, Jack's parents were ecstatic. My parents' reaction was more subdued. "Do you know what it is yet?" Mom asked immediately. I shook my head. "It's too early to tell." As the months passed, their interest in the baby's gender became almost obsessive. When we finally revealed it was a boy, their relief was palpable. "A grandson," Dad exclaimed. "That's wonderful news, Miranda." I tried not to read too much into their reaction, focusing instead on preparing for our son's arrival. Little Alexander came into the world on a rainy Tuesday, his tiny hand wrapping around my finger as if to say, "I'm here, Mom. I've got you." As I held him, I vowed to give him all the love and support I'd craved as a child. While I was navigating new motherhood, Ethan continued to drift. He picked up odd jobs here and there, but nothing stuck. He was still living at home, much to our parents' poorly concealed frustration. During a rare family dinner, I tried to broach the subject gently. "You know, Ethan, there's an entry-level position opening up at my company. I could put in a good word." "Miranda," Mom cut me off sharply. "Your brother doesn't need your charity. He's just taking his time to find the right opportunity." Dad nodded in agreement. "You were lucky, Miranda. Things just fell into place for you. Not everyone has it so easy." I blinked, stunned. Lucky? The sleepless nights studying, the years of juggling work and school, the constant struggle to prove my worth, none of that felt like luck. But I swallowed my retort, not wanting to start an argument. As I looked around the table, at my parents' defensive postures, Ethan's sullen expression, and little Alexander babbling happily in his high chair, I realized something profound. Family isn't just about blood. It's about support, understanding, and unconditional love. And sometimes, the family you choose can fill the gaps left by the one you're born into. As Alexander's 5th birthday approached, we planned a trip to my hometown, Jack, our son, and me. Our first stop was Grandma Rose's house. We spent a wonderful afternoon with her, Alexander captivated by her stories and the old photos she showed him. As we were leaving, Grandma pulled me aside. "Your parents have been struggling," she said softly. Maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones?" The next day, we stood on my parents' doorstep. Mom answered, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Dad was in his armchair, Ethan slouched on the couch. They both looked up as we entered. After awkward greetings and stilted small talk, Mom cleared her throat. "Miranda, we need to talk to you about something." What followed was a halting explanation of their financial troubles. Medical bills, Ethan's ongoing unemployment, the lingering college debt, it had all piled up. "We hate to ask," Dad said, not meeting my eyes, "but we could use some help." I glanced at Jack, who gave me a subtle nod. Despite everything, these were my parents. "Of course," I heard myself say. "I can send some money each month." The relief on their faces was palpable. We worked out the details, $1,500 a month, with the understanding that they could reach out if emergencies arose. Over the next 2 years, I faithfully sent the money each month. There were occasional requests for extra help, a broken water heater, unexpected car repairs, which I always obliged. It felt good to be able to help, to maybe finally earn their approval. When Thanksgiving rolled around, we found ourselves back in my childhood home. The house was full, aunts, uncles, cousins, and Grandma Rose all crowded around the dining table. As we ate, Mom and Dad couldn't stop talking about Ethan. "He's been at his new job for 3 months now," Mom beamed. "Such a hard worker." Dad chimed in, "Did you see the new sofa cushions? Ethan bought those with his first paycheck." So thoughtful of him. I glanced around the room, noting the new curtains, the fresh paint on the walls, the updated appliances in the kitchen. All purchased with the money I'd been sending. But I bit my tongue, not wanting to spoil the mood. Jack squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. Alexander, oblivious to the undercurrents, happily chatted with his cousins. The Thanksgiving dinner continued, the chatter of family filling the air. I was just starting to relax when Alexander tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, can I go play in the other room?" he asked, his eyes bright with the restlessness of a 5-year-old at a grown-up gathering. I nodded, ruffling his hair. "Sure, sweetie. Just don't make too much noise, okay? As Alexander scampered off, I turned back to the conversation. Barely a minute had passed when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, confusion furrowing my brow. The caller ID read, "Mom." I looked up at my mother, sitting directly across from me at the table. "Mom, why are you calling me?" She frowned, shaking her head. "I'm not calling you, dear. My phone's in the living room." Just then, Alexander reappeared in the doorway, my mother's phone clutched in his small hands. The room fell quiet as all eyes turned to him. "Mommy," he said, his voice ringing in the sudden silence. "I found Grandma's phone and I wanted to see who she talks to. I saw a funny name, Cash Cow, and clicked on it to see who it would call." "Why did it call you, Mommy?" "What's a cash cow?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Cash cow. Is that all I was to them? I looked around the table. My relatives sat frozen, forks halfway to their mouths. Grandma Rose's face was a mask of shock and anger. And my parents, they had gone deathly pale. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until something inside me snapped. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Cash cow," I repeated, my voice trembling. "Is that what I am to you?" My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. My father couldn't even meet my eyes. "Let me tell you all something," I continued, addressing the whole table. "For the past 2 years, I've been sending my parents $1,500 every month. When they've asked for extra, I've sent that too. All those new things you've been admiring? The curtains, the appliances, the fresh paint? That was all bought with my money." I could feel tears pricking at my eyes, but I blinked them back. I did this despite years of being treated like I was second best. Despite being sent away as a child, despite having to work my way through college while Ethan got everything handed to him. I did it because I thought maybe, finally, you'd see me. You'd be proud of me. My voice cracked on the last words. But instead, I'm just your cash cow. A resource to be milked dry. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Jack stood up and put his arm around me, a solid presence at my side. Alexander, not fully understanding but sensing the tension, came and wrapped his arms around my legs. The silence in the room was deafening. I stood there, heart pounding, waiting for my parents to say something, anything. An apology, an explanation, even a denial. But what came next shocked me to my core. My mother's face hardened, her eyes flashing with indignation. "Well, of course you help us. We gave birth to you, raised you, it's your duty. Don't be so sensitive about a silly phone contact." I felt as if I'd been slapped. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt bubbled to the surface. Duty? Is that what you think this is? Well, let me make this clear, from this day forward, I'm done. No more money, no more help. I'm cutting ties. At the mention of losing financial support, Mom's demeanor changed instantly. Tears sprang to her eyes. "How can you be so heartless? After everything we've done for you." She looked around the table, seeking support from our relatives. But to her surprise, and mine, they remained silent. One by one, they looked away from her pleading gaze. Then Grandma Rose spoke up, her voice quivering with anger. "Heartless? You dare call Miranda heartless after how you've treated her? Well, let me tell you something, I want nothing more to do with you either. And you can forget about any inheritance. It's all going to Miranda and Alexander." The room erupted into chaos. Mom was sobbing, Dad was trying to calm her down, and Ethan just sat there, looking bewildered. In the midst of it all, I felt Jack's hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "I think it's time we left," he said softly. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. We gathered Alexander and our things, said goodbye to Grandma Rose and the other relatives, and walked out without another word to my parents. True to my word, I stopped all financial support. The call started almost immediately, first pleading, then angry, then downright abusive. When the messages turned into threats, I warned them that I'd take legal action if they didn't stop. Eventually, the calls and messages trickled to a stop. Life went on. I focused on my career, on Jack, on raising Alexander. Grandma Rose became an even bigger part of our lives, her love and support a balm to the wound left by my parents' betrayal. Years passed. Through the grapevine, I heard that Ethan had racked up significant debts. My parents, in a last-ditch effort to bail him out, had to sell their house. The three of them ended up in a small apartment across town. When I heard the news, I was surprised to find that I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, not even anger anymore. They had made their choices, just as I had made mine. Today, as I watch Alexander play in our backyard, Jack by my side, and Grandma Rose laughing from her favorite chair on the patio, I realize something profound. I've finally found my place, my worth. And no one can take that away from me.
Hi, I'm Susan, a 28-year-old graphic designer navigating life with a chronic back condition caused by a car accident 3 years ago. Things were manageable, thanks to my prescribed medication, until my mother-in-law decided to interfere. You're absolutely glowing today, Susan. The new client loved your designs, my best friend Jessica said during lunch. A nurse at the local hospital, Jessica and I have been inseparable since college. Thanks, Jess. I've been feeling great lately. The treatment Dr. Torres prescribed is working wonders. I hesitated, then added, speaking of good news, Thomas and I are expecting. Jessica's eyes widened. Oh my God, that's amazing. Does the dragon lady know yet? Jessica, I scolded, laughing. Jennifer isn't that bad. Well, most of the time. Deep down, I knew Jessica wasn't entirely wrong. Jennifer, my mother-in-law, was a wealthy widow who thrived on control. At Sunday dinner, her reaction was precisely what I feared. Darling, this is wonderful news. Jennifer clasped my hands in hers, her perfectly manicured nails digging in just slightly. You'll need to move in with me during the difficult months. Thomas, sweetheart, you're always so busy with work. I can take care of her properly. I noticed Diana, my sister-in-law, flinch at Jennifer's words. She and her husband Charles rarely spoke up. Diana caught my eye and quickly looked away. Actually, Mom, we're planning to handle things ourselves, I said, trying to sound firm. Nonsense. With your condition, you'll need experienced guidance. The way she emphasized condition made my skin crawl. At my next checkup, Dr. Torres emphasized the importance of my medication. Susan, your health comes first. We'll adjust the dosage for the baby, but stopping it completely isn't safe. Can you explain that to my mother-in-law? I asked, half joking. She insists medications are harmful during pregnancy. Let me be clear, Dr. Torres said, his tone serious. Ignoring this could have severe consequences. That evening, Thomas tried to mediate. Mom means well, honey. She just wants to help. Thomas, don't you see? Something feels off. How do you notice how Charles and Diana barely speak when she's around? They're just private people, he said with a shrug. Mom's been amazing since Dad died. Running charities, helping at church. I couldn't shake my unease, especially after Jennifer began setting up a nursery in her house without consulting me. Susan's so blessed to have me, she announced at her social gathering, as if I wasn't standing right there. The suffocation began the moment I moved into her home. Jennifer hovered constantly. No coffee, no stress, no autonomy. She even threw out all my food, replacing it with a better diet. One morning, I reached for my medication, only to find the drawer empty. Looking for something, Jennifer stood in the doorway, her smile tight. My medication. Where is it? I disposed of those harmful pills. Natural remedies are better for my grandchild. They're prescribed. I need them for my back pain. Back pain makes better mothers, she said dismissively, dragging me downstairs despite my protests. The pain was excruciating. At my next checkup, Dr. Torres frowned. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. Where's your medication? I can't find it, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. Jessica visited after her shift, gasping when she saw me struggle to stand. What's that bruise on your arm? Jennifer helps me up the stairs. She's just very hands-on. This isn't help, Susan. This is abuse, and you should hear what she's been saying at church. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? She's telling everyone you're mentally unstable, that you're unfit to be a mother. Susan, Mrs. Henderson from a hospital board said Jennifer's been asking about postpartum depression facilities. The room spun. She's? What? Diana's voice interrupted from the doorway. I should have told you sooner. She hesitated, tears brimming. When I was pregnant, I lost the baby because of her. That night, I overheard Jennifer on the phone. I'm very worried about Susan's mental state. She refuses to eat properly, acts erratically. Thomas needs to consider alternative care arrangements after the baby is born. I tried calling Thomas, but Jennifer had confiscated my phone. Your phone activities agitate you, dear, she'd say, locking it away. The next morning, I could barely walk. Jennifer's eyes sparkled with satisfaction, feeling under the weather. Perhaps if you followed my guidance better. Staring at my reflection, bruised, pale, and shaking, I realized this wasn't just about control. Jennifer was dangerous, and I was trapped with no medication, no contact with the outside world, and growing fear for my baby's safety. That's when I noticed the empty prescription bottles in her bathroom trash. My hands trembled as I carefully picked up the destroyed pill bottles. They were mine. Looking for something, Charles's voice startled me. He stood in the doorway, his face grim. I should have warned you sooner, he said. She did the same thing to Diana. What happened to Diana? I whispered, dreading his answer. She was high risk, needed medication to manage her pregnancy. Mom insisted on natural motherhood, building strength through pain. Diana lost the baby at 6 months. The doctor said it was from untreated complications. My stomach churned. Why didn't you stop her? She controls everything, our inheritances, the family business. But I can't stand by and watch this happen again. Charles hesitated before leaning closer. Check behind the loose panel in her medicine cabinet. Following his lead, I pried open the hidden compartment and found dozens of prescription bottles. Some were mine. Others had different names. She takes them herself, Charles whispered. Has for years. It started after she put Grandma in that awful nursing home. There was an investigation back then, but she buried it. From that moment, Jessica and I documented everything. We photographed the bruises, recorded conversations, and saved texts where Jennifer told Thomas I was too unstable to talk. Jessica uncovered even more. Remember Mrs. Peterson? She asked one day. Her daughter works at the bank. Jennifer's been forging Thomas's signatures and transferring company funds into her accounts. When Thomas finally came home for a weekend, I confronted him. I was exhausted, barely able to stand, but I laid out everything. The empty bottles, the bruises, the financial records. She stole my medication, Thomas. She's been taking it herself. That's ridiculous, Jennifer snapped, appearing in the doorway. She's having mental episodes. Ask anyone at church. Like how you asked about postpartum facilities? I shot back. Like how you spread rumors about me being unfit to be a mother. I was protecting my grandchild, she hissed. Like you protected Diana's baby? The color drained from Jennifer's face. What is she talking about, Ma? Thomas demanded. Before Jennifer could respond, a wave of pain hit me. It was so intense I collapsed, the last thing I heard being Jessica shouting for someone to call 911. When I woke up in the hospital, Dr. Torres was livid. Severe medical neglect, malnutrition, untreated chronic pain, he said. Susan, I've had to report this. She's been stealing my medication, I whispered, barely able to speak. I know, blood tests confirmed it. Social services is involved now. Thomas sat by my bedside, his face pale. The investigators found records, he said quietly, complaints about Mom, Grandma's caregivers, the nursing home, even her old housekeeper, all buried with money and threats. There are even suspicious withdrawals after Dad's accident. Diana came in later, holding a thick folder. The police found these in her house. Records of forged prescriptions, financial fraud, even a diary outlining how she planned to get custody of your baby. Dr. Torres returned with another update. Jennifer is being questioned by police. They found prescriptions from 12 different doctors in her home. But right now, our focus is getting you and the baby healthy. Leaving Jennifer's house felt like stepping into a new world. Thomas made sure we moved far away, installing security cameras, and changing all the locks. One morning, Jessica showed me her phone over coffee in our new kitchen. "Did you see the church newsletter? Jennifer's been removed from all committees after Charles and Diana testified. The congregation is in shock. The dominoes were falling fast. Jennifer's perfect facade shattered completely when Mrs. Henderson caught her stealing prescriptions from the senior center's medicine cabinet. The security footage was damning. Jennifer was caught on camera methodically rifling through the senior center's medical storage room during what was supposed to be a charity visit. The nerve of that woman," Mrs. Henderson spat during the emergency board meeting. Her voice shook with rage. "All these years preaching about charity while stealing from elderly residents. She even took Mrs. Johnson's heart medication last month." Jennifer's downfall didn't stop there. Former housekeepers began coming forward, their voices no longer silenced by her threats. Maria, who worked for Jennifer for over a decade, filed the first lawsuit, inspiring others to share their horror stories. "She locked me in the basement when I threatened to report her for stealing Mr. Mitchell's pain medication before he died," Maria testified, her hands trembling as she described the 12-hour ordeal. She said no one would believe a housekeeper over her. Jennifer's empire of lies and manipulation crumbled under the weight of her victims' voices. The birth of my daughter, Olivia Rose Mitchell, was a moment of pure joy, untainted by Jennifer's presence. She was healthy, perfect, and most importantly, free from her grandmother's control. The delivery room was filled with love and support, everything my pregnancy should have been from the start. Thomas held Olivia one evening as we sat in our new peaceful home. "Mrs. Wallace from the country club called," he said. "The IRS is investigating Mom's charity foundation. She's been writing off personal expenses as donations. They've uncovered millions in tax fraud." Not long after, our home security system pinged during Olivia's nap. Checking the camera, I saw Jennifer sobbing at our door. Her designer makeup ran down her face, and her once perfect appearance was disheveled. "Please, I'm sorry," she begged, her voice cracking. "I need help. Everyone's abandoned me, the club, the church. I'm facing jail time. I'm your mother, Thomas. You can't let them do this to me." Thomas's voice was steady as he answered through the intercom. "No, you're not. Mothers don't torture their children or try to kill their grandchildren. Goodbye, Jennifer." A week later, we watched her luxury car get repossessed. Her once loyal social circle vanished. The woman who had commanded attention at every social gathering now couldn't even get a table at the local diner. 10 years. Jessica read from the news article one morning. She got 10 years for prescription fraud, elder abuse, and tax evasion. Most of her assets are going to victim compensation. The judge's harsh sentence reflected the severity of her crimes, especially after hearing of the senior center thefts. Diana and Charles used their share of the compensation to open a support center for survivors of family abuse, turning their pain into purpose. Thomas rebuilt the family business with integrity, implementing strict financial controls and transparent practices. Every so often, Jennifer sent us letters from prison. They were filled with tear-stained promises of change and requests to meet Olivia. I never opened them. "Some toxins don't deserve a second chance to poison you," I said as I tore up the latest letter. "Olivia deserves better than her manipulation." Olivia is in kindergarten now, bright, happy, and surrounded by real love. My back still aches occasionally, a painful reminder of those dark months, but I have proper medication, a supportive family, and peace. Sometimes people ask if I feel guilty about Jennifer dying alone in prison after her stroke last month. I don't. "Mommy, tell me a story." Olivia calls from her bedroom, her voice full of joy. I smile as I head upstairs. My story isn't about forgiveness or reconciliation. It's about survival, justice, and protecting your children from toxic people, even when they share your blood. Hey everyone, I'm Linda. I'm 24, and today I'm going to tell you how my dream of becoming a pediatrician nearly crumbled, all because of the one person who promised to support me forever. Have you thought about maybe taking a break from school? Mackie's question hung in the air over dinner. I froze, my fork suspended mid-air, instantly recognizing that manipulative tone he developed lately. "We've discussed this before," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not taking a break when I'm doing so well. It felt like deja vu, taking me back 2 years to the night we first met at my friend's gallery opening. He was everything I thought I wanted, charming, successful, and he seemed genuinely supportive of my ambitions. We got married within 6 months. Listen, babe, I'm just saying, we're not getting any younger. Don't you want to start our family? I was putting away my textbooks when my phone buzzed. It was Margaret. Girl, did you see the time? Rounds in 20 minutes. I panicked. Matthew, did you mess with my alarm again? He shrugged nonchalantly. It keeps me up at night. That's the third time this week, Margaret muttered when I arrived, rushing to the hospital. Something's off, Linda. I pushed it out of my mind and threw myself into my pediatric rotation. Working with kids reminded me why I fought so hard to be here. That was fantastic work with the Thompson kid, Dr. Chen said, catching me after rounds. You have a natural gift. Ever thought of specializing in pediatrics? I'd love that, I beamed. I'd be honored if you could mentor me. Absolutely, she smiled. You've got potential not many show. Later that evening, Matthew seemed unusually interested in my phone. Who's this Dr. Chen you're always texting? He asked, casually. She's my mentor. But wait, how do you know I'm texting her? I saw the notification, he said. I frowned. My phone was in my bag across the room. You've been checking my phone. Can you blame me? His voice rose. You're always at the hospital or studying. How do I know what you're really up to? I'm doing what I've always done, Matthew, pursuing my dream of becoming a doctor. You used to support that. That was before I realized how much it would take you away from us, he snapped, his eyes darkening. From our future family. Later, in our shared office, I noticed my laptop was open. I always closed it. Checking the browser history, I found searches I never made. He had been monitoring everything. The next day, at the pediatric ward, a tiny voice interrupted my thoughts. Dr. Mitchell, look what I made for you. Little Emma held up a crayon drawing. It's beautiful, sweetie. Is that us? Yeah. When I grow up, I want to be just like you. My phone buzzed again. Margaret. We need to talk. Matthew came by the study group asking weird questions about Dr. Chen. This isn't normal. I stared at the message, my hands trembling. The sweet man who swept me off my feet 2 years ago was disappearing, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I came home to find shredded study materials scattered across the floor. My laptop screen was shattered, the hard drive ripped out. What happened here? I asked, my voice shaking. Oh, those old papers. Matthew's tone was infuriatingly casual. I was cleaning up. They looked like trash. Those were my annotated study guides. My finals are next week, and my laptop. Maybe if you put as much effort into us as you do into your books, things wouldn't be falling apart, he snapped. Desperate, I called Margaret in tears. I don't know what to do. Finals are next week. Get over here now, she insisted. I've got your cloud backup from our last study session. But Linda, something's seriously wrong. As I grabbed my coat, Matthew's brother, Andrew, blocked my way. Listen, princess, my brother works hard to give you this life. Know your place and drop this doctor fantasy. Get out of my way, Andrew, or you'll regret it. At Margaret's place, things went from bad to worse. Your joint account is empty, she showed me, holding up her phone. That's impossible, I stammered. My student loan refund was just deposited. Together, we scrolled through months of withdrawals I hadn't made. My hands shook. The next day, Dr. Chen found me crying in the conference room. Here, she said softly, handing me a card. This is a number for a women's resource center. And Linda, this isn't your fault. He was so different when we met, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Take this, she pressed a small notebook into my hands. Document everything, times, dates, witnesses. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Is this Linda? I'm Rachel, Matthew's ex-girlfriend. My heart skipped a beat. How did she get my number? Margaret found me, Rachel explained. Listen carefully. Matthew did the same thing to me 3 years ago when I was in law school. What do you mean? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. He destroyed everything, my notes, my laptop, even my relationships. He kept saying a wife shouldn't have a career. I lost my scholarship because of him. Why are you telling me this now? Because I wish someone had warned me. Check the storage unit on 5th Street, Unit 3177. You'll find proof of what he's really been doing with your money. That night, I started a secret video diary on a new phone Margaret got for me. Day 1 of documentation. Found my study materials destroyed. Time 7:30 p.m. Witness, Margaret Parker. As I was recording, I heard the front door key turn. Quickly, I hid the phone under a pile of clothes. Matthew walked in, eyes cold and unfeeling. Still upset about those papers, he sneered. A real wife would be more concerned about why her husband had to destroy them in the first place. I forced a smile, keeping my voice calm. You're right, Matthew, I'm sorry. He gave me a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. See, was that so hard? Now let's talk about quitting school. I nodded along, Rachel's warning echoing in my mind. One way or another, I was going to find out what was in that storage unit. The next day, I made my way to the storage facility on 5th Street. Unit 3177 was packed with boxes of real estate documents. My hands trembled as I flipped through files, falsified loan applications, forged signatures, illegal property transfers. I've been trying to track these down for months, a voice behind me said, making me jump. I turned to see a man in a suit. I'm Michael Thompson, Matthew's business partner. Those files prove he and his brother Andrew have been running a massive fraud scheme. How long have you known? I asked, my heart racing. Long enough to build a case, but I need your help, he said, his voice urgent. The FBI is interested, but they need more evidence. You can get it. I returned home, determined to act like everything was normal. Maybe you're right about medical school, I told Matthew, feigning defeat. Finally seeing sense, he said, a smug grin spreading across his face. I knew you'd come around. That night, I found my stethoscope snapped in half on the bed. Consider it motivation to quit, Matthew smirked. I dialed Rachel. He's escalating, I whispered. That's how it started with me, she said. He isolated me, destroyed everything I cared about. Don't let him win. Margaret and I began moving my important documents to her place, piece by piece. My birth certificate, social security card, passport. We were being careful, but Matthew was becoming more suspicious. One evening, he caught me packing up my medical books. What's this? Planning to run? He demanded, eyes blazing. No, I was just. He slammed his hand against the wall beside my head. You ungrateful bitch, after everything I've done for you. Terrified, I fled to Dr. Chen's office, bruises forming on my arm where he had grabbed me. We're getting you a restraining order right now, she said, taking photos of the bruises. I know a judge who can expedite it. He has Andrew watching the house, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Stay with me tonight, Dr. Chen insisted. Tomorrow, we'll move you somewhere safe. Michael called with an update. The FBI is very interested in these documents, but you need to be careful. Matthew's getting desperate. With Margaret's help, I moved the last of my belongings while Matthew was at work. My cousin's place is off the grid, she reassured me. He'll never find you there. As I packed, I found a letter from my medical school. Final exam rescheduling approved due to domestic violence documentation. My phone buzzed. It was Michael. Everything's ready. The feds move tomorrow. I took one last look at the house I once thought would be my forever home. Matthew's latest threat echoed in my mind. You'll never be a doctor. You're nothing without me. Watch me, I thought, closing the door behind me. After finishing my final exam, I hugged Dr. Chen tightly. I can't thank you enough, I said, my voice filled with gratitude. Her study materials had been a lifesaver. You earned this, Linda. Every single point, she smiled. Minutes later, my phone buzzed with breaking news. Local real estate mogul arrested in massive fraud scheme. Matthew's mugshot filled the screen. It's over, Michael texted. FBI just raided the office. Andrew tried throwing Matthew under the bus, offered to testify against him. What happened? I asked. Andrew thought he could save himself, but he ended up implicating himself even more. They're both going down. The next call was from Rachel. Linda, I testified about everything, the abuse, the sabotage, the financial manipulation. 3 other women came forward too. Weeks later, Margaret read the sentencing report aloud. 15 years for Matthew, fraud, tax evasion, and financial abuse. Andrew got 8 years. Both had their real estate licenses permanently revoked. The feds seized everything: houses, cars, bank accounts. Standing in my graduation gown, I could hardly believe it. Top of my class, with a residency at Boston Children's Hospital waiting for me. "This is for you," Rachel said, handing me an envelope. Inside was her law school acceptance letter. "I'm going back. You inspired me." Dr. Chen approached, surrounded by a group of students. "Linda, meet our first support group for students facing domestic challenges. Would you share your story?" "Of course," I replied. Looking at their faces, I saw my past self, scared but determined. Michael had transformed the real estate business, making it entirely legitimate. "Your case helped us clean house completely," he told me one day. Then a letter arrived at the hospital with a prison return address. Matthew's handwriting was unmistakable. "My dear Linda, I'm so sorry for everything." I dropped it in the shredder without reading further. Down the hall, my pediatric patients were waiting. Dr. Mitchell, guess what? Little Emma, now cancer-free, ran up to me. "I got accepted to pre-med." "That's amazing." I hugged her, remembering the drawing she'd had given me years ago. Later, Dr. Chen appeared in my office doorway. "Ready for the domestic violence awareness panel?" "Always," I replied, grabbing my white coat, the one with Dr. Linda Mitchell, pediatric oncology, embroidered on it. I looked at my reflection and saw no trace of the frightened woman I'd once been. Matthew tried to bury me, not realizing I was a seed. Now I had bloomed, helping others grow through their own storms while he rotted in a cell of his own making. My new office overlooked the hospital garden, where I counseled students dealing with toxic relationships. "Your abuser's biggest fear," I always told them, "isn't that you'll leave. It's that you'll thrive without them." So what would you do if your toxic partner tried sending you an apology letter from prison? Would you read it for closure, or would you shred it without a second thought, like I did? Share your thoughts in the comments below.